Your Honor, I didn't stop because I thought consequences didn't apply to me. I was wrong. I hurt her, and I tried to buy my way out.
I have sat on this bench for over 30 years. I have looked into the eyes of thousands of defendants. I've seen hardened criminals tremble, and I've seen honest men weep because they made one mistake that cost them everything. But over time, you learn to spot the ones who don't tremble, the ones who walk in here believing that the courtroom is just another boardroom they can dominate, and that the judge is just another employee they can buy. They are wrong. And usually, by the time they realize just how wrong they are, the gavel has already fallen. This case didn't look like a war when it appeared on my docket. It looked like a clerical error. Case number 592B, State versus Miles Rohr. Just a name on a piece of paper. But when the bailiff called all rise, the air in the room didn't just change, it froze. The doors swung open, and in walked Miles Rohr, 34 years old, the founder of Rohr Dynamics, a man whose face is on the cover of tech magazines every other month. He didn't walk like a defendant facing serious charges. He walked like he was inspecting a property he intended to purchase. He wore a charcoal Tom Ford suit, tailored so perfectly it barely looked like fabric. His white shirt was crisp, top button undone, signaling a casual disrespect for the formality of my court. On his wrist sat a platinum Rolex Daytona, catching the overhead lights and flashing a beam across my bench every time he checked the time, which he did, repeatedly, as if justice was wasting his precious schedule. But it wasn't just him, it was what he brought with him. I actually stopped writing and looked up over my glasses. Behind this one man marched 12 lawyers. I counted them. 12. They moved in a tight, synchronized phalanx, a wall of expensive wool and Italian leather designed to separate Miles Rohr from reality. 12 briefcases, 12 sets of cufflinks, 12 faces trained to look bored by the suffering of others. One of them, a man in the front with silver hair and a tie that probably cost $1,000, carried a leather portfolio stamped with a gold monogram. They took up the entire defense table, then spilled over into the first row of the gallery, pushing aside the public like they owned the space. Miles didn't sit down immediately. He stood there, scanning the room with a look of mild annoyance, the way you look at a waiter who brought you the wrong wine. He didn't look at me. He looked past me. His lead attorney, Mr. Whitcomb, stepped forward. I knew Whitcomb. He was the kind of lawyer who charged by the minute and spoke in sound bites. He placed his hands on the defense table, leaning in with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Your Honor, Whitcomb said, his voice smooth as oil, we are here on a matter involving Mr. Rohr. Given my client's significant obligations to his shareholders in the market, we would like to address this efficiently. We anticipate a dismissal, so perhaps we can expedite this? Efficiently, expedite, as if this hearing was a transaction at a drive-through window. I let the silence hang in the air for a long moment. I let the hum of the ventilation system become the loudest thing in the room. I wanted them to feel it. I wanted them to understand that in this room, time moves at my pace, not the stock markets. Mr. Whitcomb, I said finally, my voice low but cutting through the silence like a razor. This is a courtroom, not a drive-through. And Mr. Rohr is not here as a CEO. He is here as defendant number 592. Miles let out a sharp breath, a scoff that was loud enough to be heard. He whispered something to the lawyer on his left, and they both smirked. I looked down at the file, opening it slowly. Mr. Rohr, I addressed him directly. You are charged with reckless driving, endangerment of human life, and the most serious count, leaving the scene of an accident involving bodily injury. I paused, looking at the 12 lawyers who were already opening their laptops, ready to bury the truth in paperwork. This is not a parking ticket, gentlemen, I said. Someone was hurt. Someone was left bleeding on the pavement while your client drove away. That statement landed like a stone. But Miles? He just checked his watch again. I looked past the wall of 12 expensive suits to the second row. That is where the reality of this case was sitting. There were no lawyers next to her, no entourage, no one carrying her bag or whispering strategy in her ear, just a woman sitting alone, clutching a manila folder, tight against her chest like it was the only thing holding her together. Her name was Elena Morales, 39 years old. a registered nurse at St. Catherine's Medical Center. She worked the night shift, the hours that exhaust the body and drain the soul, just to provide for her 8-year-old son, Mateo. A son with type 1 diabetes, a condition that doesn't care if you are tired, broke, or injured. It demands attention every single day. Elena wore plain black pants and a blue cardigan that had seen better days. Her shoes were scuffed at the toes. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, practical clip. No jewelry, no glow, just fatigue. The deep, bone-weary exhaustion you see in people who spend their lives serving everyone else, only to have to come here and beg the world for basic fairness. Miss Morales, I asked, softening my tone, are you the complainant? She stood up slowly, favoring her left side. Yes, Your Honor. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the tremor of strain underneath it. She didn't look at Miles Rohr. She stared straight ahead, as if looking at him would break the fragile composure she had built. I called Officer Luis Ramirez to the stand, badge number 271. He stepped forward in uniform, back straight, eyes clear. He didn't walk with the swagger of the defense team. He walked with the weight of duty. He didn't come here to impress a billionaire. He came to tell the truth. At approximately 10:47 p.m. on April 18th, Ramirez stated, his voice filling the room, without the need for theatrical projection, I was stationary, with emergency lights activated, assisting a disabled vehicle on Broad Street. Traffic was slowed. He paused, consulting his notebook, then looked directly at the defense table. A black Lamborghini Aventador approached at a high rate of speed. A Lamborghini. Of course. Because when you think the world is your playground, speed limits are just suggestions for poor people. My radar estimate and visual assessment placed the vehicle at approximately 82 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. Let that sink in for a moment. 82 inches of 30. That is not an accident. That is not a momentary lapse in judgment. That is a choice that says, my thrill is more important than your safety. The vehicle did not yield, Ramirez continued. It passed within approximately 2 feet of my patrol unit. I had to step backward to avoid being struck. I watched Miles Rohr while the officer spoke. He wasn't listening. He was examining his fingernails, looking bored, as if this testimony was a tedious commercial break in the movie of his life. Not 1 inch of shame on his face, not a flicker of regret. Ramirez continued, his voice hardening slightly. The Lamborghini swerved to avoid my unit and struck a Honda Civic that was exiting Clayton Avenue. The Honda spun and impacted the curb. The driver, Miss Elena Morales, sustained injuries consistent with whiplash and a fractured left wrist. Elena swallowed hard, blinking fast, forcing herself not to cry in front of these men who viewed her pain as a legal inconvenience. And then Ramirez delivered the line that made my jaw tighten, the line that turned this from a traffic matter into a moral failing. The Lamborghini did not stop. It left the scene heading southbound, leaving the scene, leaving a hurt woman in a spun-out car, leaving a police officer standing inches from death. That isn't just reckless driving. That is selfishness, weaponized with horsepower. I pursued, Ramirez added. The vehicle accelerated. I discontinued the chase at 2:23 a.m. after the vehicle was located parked at the Valerian Hotel garage. The Valerian, the most expensive hotel in the city, a place where the lobby smells like money and the staff is trained to treat people like Miles Rohr as if they are royalty. While Elena was being loaded into an ambulance, Miles was parking his supercar in a heated garage. I looked up from the file. My eyes locked onto the defendant. Mr. Rohr, I said, my voice cutting through the room like cold steel. You left the scene of an accident where a nurse was injured. Miles smiled, a smirk, really, like he was watching a show he found mildly entertaining but poorly written. Allegedly, he said, one word, cold, smug, dismissive, and in that one word, he told me everything I needed to know about his character. Whitcomb, the lead attorney, jumped in before the echo of that allegedly had even faded. He sensed the shift in the room's temperature, and he tried to throw a blanket over it. Your Honor, Whitcomb said, smoothing his silk tie with a practiced motion, my client denies the allegations vehemently. There are significant issues of identification here, issues of procedural integrity. We have retained independent experts who are prepared to testify that the telemetry data is unreliable, and I raise my hand, palm out, a universal stop sign that works whether you are a street cop or a judge. Mr. Whitcomb, I said, I don't need to hear from your paid experts right now. I don't need theories. I need to hear from the human being sitting in the second row. I nodded to Elena. Go ahead, Miss Morales. Elena stood up again. She looked small against the backdrop of the high ceilings and the dark mahogany wood of the courtroom. But when she spoke, she didn't sound small. She sounded like a mother. Your Honor, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was coming home from the hospital. We were short-staffed that night. I had worked a double shift, 16 hours on my feet. She took a breath, her fingers digging into that manila folder until her knuckles turned white. My son, Mateo, he's 8 years old. He has type 1 diabetes. I have to be home by 11 p.m. to check his sugar levels. My mother watches him, but she's 68 and she gets confused with the insulin pen sometimes. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. When that car hit me, she continued, her hand instinctively touching her braced wrist, I felt the bone snap. I heard it crack like a dry branch. My car spun, and for a second, I couldn't move my neck. I sat there in the dark, smelling burnt rubber and gasoline, and I honestly thought I was going to die in that car. I thought about who would give Mateo his shot if I didn't come home. She swallowed hard, fighting back tears. The next day, I went to work anyway. That line hit me harder than the details of the crash. I couldn't afford not to, Your Honor, she said simply. I put a brace on it. I took ibuprofen. My patients needed me, and my son needs his medicine. Insulin isn't cheap. Then she looked up at Miles Rohr, just for a second, a look of confusion, not hatred. He didn't even tap his brakes, she whispered. And then a sound cut through the solemnity of the moment. A laugh, not a nervous chuckle, not a cough, a genuine, amused laugh. Miles Rohr shook his head, leaning back in his chair with a smirk playing on his lips. So dramatic, he muttered. I heard it. My clerk heard it. Elena heard it. The air instantly left the room. It wasn't just rude, it was cruel. It was the sound of a man who views other people's pain as a performance for his amusement. I leaned forward, my robe rustling in the silence. Mr. Rohr, I said, my voice dropping an octave. This is not a theater. This is a court of law. He spread his hands, palms up, the universal gesture of the misunderstood genius. I'm just saying, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. People always exaggerate when they see someone like me involved. They see the car, they see the suit, and suddenly it's a tragedy. It's a payday. Let's be real. Someone like me, he meant rich. He meant powerful. He meant untouchable. The prosecutor, Miss Janet Shue, stepped forward then. She had been waiting. She held a flash drive in her hand like it was a weapon. Your Honor, she said, her eyes locked on Miles. The state has surveillance footage from the Valerian Hotel garage. We have dashcam footage, and we have vehicle telemetry data obtained via warrant. Whitcomb frowned, sensing the trap. Your Honor, will address authenticity. I cut him off. Proceed, Miss Shue. Miss Shue plugged the drive in. The Lamborghini is registered to Rohr Holdings, LLC. The car's internal computer, its black box, recorded a speed of 82 miles per hour at 10:47 p.m. It recorded hard steering input. It recorded impact. And then she looked at Miles. It recorded acceleration. Machines don't lie. Machines don't care who your father is. Machines don't care about your stock price. Miles shrugged, unimpressed. Cars are complicated, he said, bored. Data can be glitches. Computers make mistakes. Then he looked over at Elena, right into her eyes, and said loud enough for the back row to hear, maybe next time, buy a safer car. Maybe next time, buy a safer car. The room went silent. Not polite, quiet. Quiet like a punch had landed. Elena's face drained of color. She didn't yell. She didn't curse. She just stood there, humiliated, looking down at her scuffed shoes as if she was being punished for being normal. for not being able to afford a tank to protect herself from his missile. I took a slow breath, gripping the edge of my bench. My father's voice came into my mind, the way it always does when someone tries to turn cruelty into confidence. He was a man who worked with his hands, who came home with dirt under his fingernails. He used to say, "A man's character isn't what he owns, it's how he treats people who can't help him." I looked at Miles Rohr. He had failed that test in every conceivable way. "Any other witnesses?" I asked Miss Shue, keeping my voice dangerously low. "Yes, Your Honor," she said. "A Mr. Darren Pike, a delivery driver who witnessed the collision." A man stood up from the back. He was nervous, twisting a work cap in his rough hands. He didn't have a suit. He didn't have a portfolio. He looked like a man who works hard for every dollar he makes. "Mr. Pike," the prosecutor asked, "what did you see?" Darren pointed a shaking finger at the defendant. "I saw that car, that Lamborghini. It had a custom plate, said more O. I remember because I thought it was crazy, like something you'd see in a rap video. It clipped the lady's car and just took off, didn't even tap the brakes." Miles rolled his eyes, loud and theatrical. "Can we stop wasting time with gig workers?" he interrupted, looking at his lead lawyer. "I have a board meeting tomorrow morning. This is tedious." I stared at him. The silence stretched until it felt heavy. "Mr. Rohr," I said, "in my courtroom, we respect everyone, especially the people who show up to tell the truth." He smirked, leaning back. "Sure," he said. "That's cute. Justice is cute." Miss Shue didn't let him enjoy his moment. She stepped forward again. "Your Honor, the state also has information regarding the defendant attempting to influence a witness." Whitcomb snapped to attention, his chair scraping the floor. "Objection. Speculation." "Tell me," I ordered, ignoring the lawyer. Miss Shue looked at Darren Pike. "Mr. Pike received a direct message at 1:11 a.m. on April 19th from a verified account associated with Mr. Rohr." Darren swallowed hard. It said, "Be smart. Don't get involved. I'll make it worth your time." The air in the room tightened. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't a mistake. That was bribery. That was intimidation. That was the action of a man who believes money can rewrite history. Whitcomb tried to smile his way out of it, smooth and slippery. "Your Honor, social media accounts are easily impersonated. Fans create fake profiles all the time. There is no proof." Miss Shue didn't blink. She clicked a button on her remote. The monitor lit up again. "The message included an attachment," she said. A photo. On the screen, a picture appeared. It was a selfie. Miles Rohr, holding a stack of $100 bills up to his ear like a phone, winking at the camera. And on his wrist, clear as day, was the exact same Rolex Daytona he was wearing right now in my courtroom. "The watch matches," Miss Shue said simply. Miles's face flickered. Just for a second, the mask slipped. I saw a flash of panic before he covered it with attitude. "I have fans," Miles said, his voice rising. "People message me. I message back. It's engagement." "A witness is not a fan, Mr. Rohr," I said. He rolled his eyes again, looking at the ceiling. Whatever, as if witness tampering was just a minor social faux pas. Elena spoke again, her voice smaller now, like she was trying not to take up space. "Your Honor," she whispered, "when my wrist broke. I couldn't draw Mateo's insulin properly that night. I had to ask my mom. She messed up the dose once. His sugar dropped to 42. She pressed her lips together, tears finally spilling over. He was shaking. His lips turned blue. I held him on the kitchen floor and I poured juice into his mouth, praying he wouldn't go into a coma. I thought I was losing him because someone couldn't be bothered to slow down." Miles shook his head, looking at his lawyers. "That is emotional manipulation," he said, sounding like a man reviewing a contract. "She's using the kid for sympathy." "No," I said, my voice thundering. "That is reality. That is the cost of your arrogance." Then Miles stood up without permission. He buttoned his jacket as if closing a deal. "Judge," he said, "with all due respect, this is a misunderstanding. I donate more in a month to charity than most people in this room make in a decade. Let's not pretend we are the same." He looked around the courtroom, sneering at the peeling paint, the worn benches, the tired people. "I thought this place handled minor stuff," he said. I didn't expect this theater. I am not one of your regulars. I leaned forward until I was looming over the bench. Mr. Rohr, you are right about one thing, I said. He smiled, thinking he had won, thinking I had finally recognized his status. You are not one of my regulars, I said, because most of my regulars know how to say, I'm sorry. The room held its breath. Miles's smile twitched, just for a fraction of a second. His face didn't know how to process being challenged. He was used to rooms where his money bought him silence, not correction. Miss Shu, the prosecutor, didn't give him time to recover. She opened another folder, her movements sharp and precise. Your Honor, she said, Exhibit B includes a certified copy of Miss Morales's wage loss, $12,900 for missed shifts. Vehicle damage estimated at $6,000. Medical deductibles totaling another $1,000. She laid the papers on the bench. Numbers. Cold, hard facts, representing rent not paid, groceries not bought, stress piled upon stress. Miles let out a loud, exasperated sigh. He reached into his jacket pocket as if reaching for a checkbook. I can pay for her little car, he said, waving a hand dismissively. Is that what this is? A fundraiser? If she needed cash, she could have just asked. A fundraiser. He reduced a court of law to a charity event for his ego. He reduced a woman's suffering to a transaction. I looked at him, feeling the heat rise up the back of my neck. Mr. Rohr, I said, restitution is not charity. It is the minimum requirement of decency. Officer Ramirez stepped forward to add one more detail to the record. Your Honor, he said, when I activated my lights behind the Lamborghini at approximately 10:53 p.m., the driver looked back through the rear window. Ramirez paused, looking Miles dead in the eye. He made an obscene gesture. He extended his middle finger, then accelerated. Miles laughed, actually laughed. That's not a crime, he said, looking at his lawyers for validation. That's communication. I was expressing my displeasure. Whitcomb tried to steady the ship, but I could see the sweat starting to bead on his forehead. Your Honor, my client is passionate. He reacts in the moment. Passion without discipline is a problem, Counselor, I said. Then Miss Shu dropped the hammer. Your Honor, she said, her voice dropping to a register that made everyone lean in. We have a public social media post from the defendant. I felt the room shift. The lawyers stiffened. Miles stopped laughing. This is from Mr. Rohr's public Instagram story, she continued, posted at 11:17 p.m. on April 18th, 30 minutes after the crash. Whitcomb stood up, knocking his chair back. Your Honor, authenticity. We haven't had time to address it, I commanded. Proceed. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life, and there was Miles Rohr. He was in the driver's seat of the Lamborghini. The engine was roaring, music blasting so loud it distorted the speakers. His grin was wide, manic, fueled by adrenaline and entitlement. The camera swung down for a moment, catching the digital speedometer. Then the video jerked. A loud bang. A scream cut through the music. The camera tilted wildly, capturing a blur of streetlights and spinning pavement. And then Miles's voice, clear as day, cutting through the chaos. Oops. That was it. Oops. Then he laughed. He turned the camera back on his face, eyes wild, and shouted over the engine. Bro, she came out of nowhere. Providence drivers are broke and blind. The screen went black. Elena covered her mouth with her good hand. Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent and devastating. She didn't want to give Miles the satisfaction of seeing her break, but how could she not? She wasn't a person to him. She was an obstacle, a broken blind inconvenience on his racetrack. Miss Shu clicked to the next image. It was a screenshot of a poll Miles had posted minutes later. Question, should I stop? Option A, nah, I'm late. Option B, pay her later. Thousands of votes, laughing emojis, people cheering him on, a digital coliseum where cruelty was the entertainment and Miles was the star. That is when the courtroom stopped feeling like a place where facts get weighed. It started feeling like a place where a soul gets measured. And Miles Rohr was coming up empty. He tried to save himself with the oldest lie in the book. That's edited, he scoffed, waving at the screen. Deep fake. AI. You can't prove that's me. Miss Shu didn't even look at him. She looked at me. We have certified extraction via warrant, Your Honor. Hash values match. It is authentic. Miles's lawyers went quiet, not because they agreed, but because they knew. They knew there was no spinning this. But Miss Shu wasn't done. There is also a Snapchat video, she said, from 12:04 a.m. The internet doesn't forget, Mr. Rohr, and law enforcement doesn't guess. Miss Shu played the video. On the screen, the scene had changed. No longer the chaotic interior of a speeding car. Now, it was the plush, golden-lit interior of a penthouse suite at the Valerian. Champagne bottles sat in silver buckets. A woman was laughing in the background. A table was covered in stacks of cash, spread out like a fan. A display of wealth so vulgar it looked like a caricature. And sitting prominently on the couch was a bright orange Hermes Birkin bag, placed there like a trophy. Miles panned the camera around the room, his face flushed with alcohol and triumph. Life hack, he said to the camera, his voice slurring slightly. If you're ever in trouble, don't talk to cops, just call expensive people. He swung the camera to reveal a row of men in suits standing in the background. Lawyers, he laughed. Look at my legal squad, best money can buy. Then he leaned into the lens, his eyes dark and serious for a moment. And if some working class nobody tries to play victim, I'll crush them in court. Watch me. Crush them. Not defend himself, not prove his innocence. Crush them. Like a bug. Like Elena. But he wasn't done. He had one more target. This judge tomorrow, Miles said on the video, sneering. He's just a paid referee. He probably still takes the bus to work. I'll walk in, write a check, and walk out. He posted that about me publicly, before he had even stepped foot in my courtroom. Now, I have been called many names in 40 years. I have been threatened. I have been insulted. I am not fragile. I don't care if he thinks I take the bus. But that wasn't just an insult to me. That was him telling the world that this court, this institution designed to protect the weak from the strong, was a joke. And when the court becomes a joke, justice becomes impossible. The video ended. The silence in the room was absolute. I looked at Miles. Did you post that video, Mr. Rohr? He crossed his arms, leaning back in his chair. Even if I did, he said, defiant. Free speech. It's my opinion. Whitcomb tried to jump in, sensing the cliff edge approaching. I stopped him with a single raised finger. No, I said. I am speaking to him. Miles leaned forward, his face twisting into a sneer. You want to lecture me? He said. Go ahead, get your soundbite. But remember, I'm not here because I'm guilty. I'm here because you people need to feel powerful. You people. He turned to Elena, who was staring at him in disbelief. And she's loving this, he said, pointing at her. Playing the saint, playing the victim, Elena whispered, her voice trembling. I just wanted you to stop. Miles laughed. A harsh, barking sound. Stop, lady. I have investors. I have a jet waiting. You think I'm pulling over because you got scared? Then he turned back to me, and he delivered the line that sealed his fate. The line that showed exactly who he was. This is what you don't understand, Judge, he said. The world needs people like me. Some of us build things. Some of us create the future. He gestured vaguely at Elena. And some of us just serve coffee and change bedpans. Elena flinched physically, as if he had slapped her. That insult cut deeper than the crash, because nurses don't just change bedpans. They hold hands while people take their last breaths. They catch the secrets of the dying. They carry the pain of strangers home to their families and still show up the next day to do it again. I felt a cold calm settle over me. Mr. Rohr, I said quietly. My mother cleaned houses to put food on the table. My father worked with his hands until they were stiff with arthritis. I didn't get to this bench by stepping on people. I got here by respecting them. Miles smirked. Nice story, he said. Doesn't change my net worth. Net worth. That was his religion. That was his shield. Miss Shu stepped forward again. Your Honor, she said, her voice steady. The state requests the court consider flight risk. We have been contacted by a federal task force. Whitcomb snapped. This is a state matter. Federal task force? That is prejudicial. It relates to bail conditions, Miss Shu said. What is the state alleging? I asked. Miss Shu looked at me, then at the doors. Potential federal charges involving wire fraud and obstruction of justice. The word obstruction made the 12 lawyers stiffen. Even the ones who looked fearless before now looked careful. Miles tried to laugh, but it sounded thin. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You're trying to scare me." Then he looked me in the eye and said the dumbest thing a man can say in front of the law. "Do you know who my father is?" he asked. "Do you know who my family knows? I could buy this courthouse and turn it into a parking lot. I could buy this courthouse." Gasps rippled through the gallery. A few angry whispers broke out. Even his own lawyers looked down, studying their shoes, realizing that no amount of legal maneuvering could save a client who was determined to dig his own grave with his mouth. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hand, looking him dead in the eye. "Your money can buy a lot of things, Mr. Rohr," I said, my voice calm, almost conversational. He smiled, that same arrogant smirk returning, thinking I finally understood the hierarchy of the world, thinking I was negotiating a price. "But it cannot buy my respect," I said. His smile faltered. "And it cannot buy your way out of accountability," I added. Miles scoffed, shaking his head. "Accountability," he spat the word out like it tasted bad. "Accountability is for people who don't have options." That line turned the room against him in a way no evidence ever could, because it showed his soul. He didn't just think he was innocent, he thought he was superior to the concept of law itself. Then Miss Shue spoke up, her voice cutting through the tension. "Your Honor, the federal agent is present today." The side door opened. A man walked in. He wasn't wearing a shiny Italian suit. He was wearing a standard issue dark suit, a badge clipped to his belt, and an expression that said he had seen men like Miles Rohr 1,000 times before. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need to shout to be heard. "Special Agent Daniel Kessler," he announced. "FBI, badge ID 5K117. Miles's eyes widened just a fraction. The color drained from his face. Agent Kessler faced me. "Your Honor, we have an active investigation involving Mr. Rohr and Rohr Dynamics. Evidence of wire fraud, securities fraud, and obstruction of justice. We request the court consider a hold due to risk of flight." Whitcomb jumped up, desperate. "Your Honor, this is prejudicial. This is a traffic hearing." Agent Kessler didn't even look at the lawyer. "This is not just a traffic case," he said calmly. "The accident is part of a pattern. Mr. Rohr believes consequences don't apply to him. That belief has harmed a lot of people." Miles snapped. The panic was setting in now. "You don't just take down someone like me," he shouted. Agent Kessler's voice stayed flat, emotionless. "We don't take down someone like you, Mr. Rohr. We take down anyone who breaks the law." Miles turned to me, anger burning in his face, his hands shaking. "You're enjoying this," he hissed. "Little people always enjoy watching big people bleed. Little people." He called me little. He called the nurse little. He called the law little. I held his gaze for a long moment. "Mr. Rohr," I said slowly, "there is one word that decides this whole situation." He narrowed his eyes, breathing hard. "What word?" I leaned forward. "Enough. One word. Enough. Not a speech, not a debate, just a boundary he couldn't buy. Remand pending further proceedings," I ordered the clerk. "Set conditions. Notify the appropriate agencies." Whitcomb protested immediately. "Your Honor, my client can post any amount. This isn't an auction." "No," I said. "It is not." Miles stood up, his voice rising to a shout. "You can't do this. I have obligations. I have meetings." "So did Miss Morales," I said, pointing to Elena. "She had to get home to her child. You didn't care." "This is class warfare," Miles screamed. "No," I said. "This is just gravity. And you are finally falling." Then, the doors at the back of the courtroom opened again, and the authority figure nobody expected walked in. It was an older man, silver hair, dignified, but with shoulders that slumped under a heavy weight. He didn't walk with arrogance. He walked with a slow, painful sadness. He stepped forward to the bar. "Your Honor," he said, his voice gravelly. "I am Charles Rohr." Miles froze. "Dad?" His father didn't look at him. He looked at me. "Judge," he said, "Agent Kessler contacted me. I'm here because I've been lied to." Miles whispered, frantic now, "Don't do this here." Dad, stop. Charles Rohr finally turned to look at his son. The look in his eyes wasn't anger, it was disappointment, the kind that breaks a child's heart more than any punishment. You brought 12 lawyers to bully a nurse, Charles said softly. You filmed yourself laughing after you hit her. Miles snapped. It was a joke. It's content. It's for the brand. Charles shook his head slowly. My mother was a nurse, he said. Your grandmother. She would be ashamed of you. Miles looked stunned. He looked like he couldn't process the idea of being judged by his own blood. Charles faced me again. Your Honor, he said, I won't ask for favors. I won't interfere. I just want you to know, whatever you decide, you have my support. Miles's face cracked, the arrogance shattered. You're siding with them? He whispered. With these nobodies? His father's voice rose, filling the room. I am siding with what is right, he said. And the room felt it. The truth had finally entered the building. Miles Rohr stood alone. 12 lawyers, billions of dollars, and yet completely alone. Mr. Rohr, I said, you have spent your life thinking you are above us. Today, you will learn that you are just one of us. At the next appearance, the atmosphere in the room had changed completely. The 12 lawyers didn't look like a wall anymore. They looked like people trying to stop a tidal wave with paper towels. Their confidence was gone, replaced by the nervous shuffling of papers. Whitcomb stood up. He looked tired. Your Honor, he said, his voice lacking its usual shine. Mr. Rohr wishes to express remorse. Miles stood up too. He was wearing the same expensive suit, but he looked smaller inside it. No smirk, no shine, no checking his Rolex. I regret, Miles said, choosing his words carefully, how things were perceived. Even now, facing the end, he couldn't admit fault. He could only blame the world for seeing him clearly. I turned to Elena. She sat with her brace still on, looking exhausted but steady. Miss Morales? She stood up, dignified. My son asks why my wrist looks broken, she said softly. I tell him sometimes people make bad choices. I don't want revenge, Your Honor. I just want him to understand what it feels like to be ignored. To feel small, that was all. No screaming, no drama, just quiet power. I turned back to Miles. You brought 12 lawyers, I said, not to find the truth, but to crush it. You mocked a nurse. You joked about running from police. You treated this courtroom like a reality show. The room was silent. Mr. Rohr, I said, for reckless driving and leaving the scene, I impose the maximum penalties within this court's authority. License suspended for 3 years. Immediate impound of the Lamborghini pending compliance. Restitution to Miss Morales in the amount of $75,000. Miles blinked. He looked relieved. He was reaching for his checkbook in his mind. He thought he had bought his way out again. But I am not finished, I said. Miles froze. You insulted a nurse, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You said people like her just change bedpans. You mocked the value of service. I leaned forward. So, I am ordering 1,000 hours of community service. Miles whispered, that's insane. Driving 82 inches a 30 is insane, I shot back. And those 1,000 hours will not be served picking up trash. They will be performed at Street Catherine's Medical Center. His eyes widened in horror. You will report, like any volunteer, I ordered. Nights and weekends. You will do the work you mocked. You will clean floors. You will change sheets. And yes, Mr. Rohr, if asked, you will change bedpans. You will learn what it means to serve without applause. No, he shook his head. I can't. You will, I said. Any violation results in immediate incarceration. Then, Agent Kessler stepped forward from the back, the final nail in the coffin. Your Honor, Kessler said, federal custody is requested following state processing. Miles turned, panic finally shattering his mask. Wait, what? You have another court date, Mr. Rohr, Kessler said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. Different building, different charges. Miles looked around for his father, for his lawyers, for anyone to save him. But there was nowhere to run. This is humiliating, he whispered as the cuffs clicked shut. I looked at him one last time. Good, I said. Maybe humiliation is the only language you understand. As the bailiffs led him away, stripped of his arrogance, his car, and his freedom, Charles Rohr walked over to Elena. He didn't offer her money, he offered her his hand. I'm sorry, the father said. Elena took his hand. Thank you, she said. Please make sure he learns. He will, Charles said, watching his son disappear through the holding cell door, one way or another. When the courtroom finally emptied, I sat there for a moment in the silence. People ask me if I enjoy punishing the rich. I don't. I enjoy teaching. I enjoy the moment when the illusion breaks and the truth comes out. Miles Rohr thought money was armor, but money isn't armor against the truth. Character is armor. Humility is armor. The bench is higher so the law can be heard, not so the judge can feel taller. And today, the law spoke loud and clear. The strong do not get to crush the weak. Not in my house. Case closed.